Chibi Assassin's Creed by Titania. First installment. Chapter 4. Ezio Auditore. After Desmond had left, Altaïr became restless. It didn't take long for him to convince Ezio, though without using any words, to help get to where Desmond was, wherever that was. They couldn't open the door as they were simply too short. Ezio estimated that they only reached Desmond to the knees. They walked over to the door and looked up at the handle. Ezio couldn't see any solutions to their problem, but Altaïr could, because the next moment he walked away, running towards Ezio and, using Ezio's head as a platform, jumped up and got a hold of the door handle. It clicked, and Ezio pushed the door open as Altaïr let go and landed on the ground beside him. Just as they walked through the door, Sean pointed at them and, by the tone of his voice, asked a question, probably to Desmond, because then Desmond turned around and, without missing a beat, Ezio followed Altaïr as they ran towards Desmond. Altaïr jumped and landed perfectly in Desmond's hood. Ezio, on the other hand, had calculated a bit wrong, and it was only just in the nick of time that Desmond catched him. Otherwise, he would have fallen to the floor and probably had hurt himself in the fall. Sean and Rebecca had to have said something, because Desmond had suddenly decided to teach them some English. It helped that the young man was fluent in both Italian and that Altaïr knew English as well. It made it a lot easier for Ezio to learn, though he got the distinct impression that the other assassin didn't really speak that much English. And the English he did use was different from what Desmond taught them. So even Altaïr had to learn some English. As they went to bed, Ezio snuggled up to Desmond's neck once again. He didn't see where Altaïr decided to lay, because the moment he lay down and cuddled close to Desmond, he fell asleep. He woke up because suddenly he had fallen to the floor. When he tried to stand up, he noticed that he was no longer small. And by the looks of Altaïr on the other side of the bed, they both had to have been transformed back to their original selves. They looked at each other for a moment, and then down at the still sleeping Desmond. They decided not to wake him up, not just yet. Instead, they walked over and sat in one of the corners of the room. Instead of just talking English, they somehow made up a whole other language consisting of Italian, Arabic, Latin, and a bit of English. Using Latin and the little bit of English they had learned as their basic language, the two exchanged words in their own language and helped each other with the pronunciations. They talked all night. Altaïr told Ezio how he had been stripped of his rank and had to redeem himself, how he had actually learned about his mistakes, and after listening to Altaïr cringe over his own arrogance and stupidity, Ezio could understand why and also began to cringe over it. What surprised Ezio most, though, was that Altaïr's master had been a Templar. It was with sadness in his tone that Altaïr told Ezio about how he had had to end the life of Al-Mualim. Even if he had been a Templar, Altaïr had still seen him as a father after the man had taken him in and had been his teacher. Ezio had then told Altaïr about how he had witnessed the hanging of his father and his two brothers. Altaïr had said nothing, but Ezio knew that the other assassin knew what it felt like to lose a father. Ezio talked about the list with names and how Leonardo had constructed and reconstructed weapons from the codex pages that he had found. He told Altaïr about the flying contraption that Leonardo had made and the ceremony he had gone through to become part of the Brotherhood. Altaïr had made a comment about how different this ceremony seemed. "We cut off the ring finger so the hidden blade does not," he said, looking down at his missing finger. "Well, they turned to branding instead," Ezio said, looking down at his own fingers. One with a permanent burnt ring on it. He then told Altaïr about Rodrigo and the apple, and how it had lit up in Leonardo's workshop just before he had gotten here. Before the sun rose up, Desmond had stirred awake. He hadn't even been surprised when he saw the two assassins sitting in a corner. He had simply walked over to them and joined them. Ezio had closed his eyes for a second, and then Altaïr was shouting in his own language while Desmond was trying to calm him down. When Ezio looked at Altaïr, he was once again a bunny. Altaïr stopped shouting, and Ezio heard Desmond heave a heavy sigh before picking Ezio up and holding him in his arms, something Ezio found rather comforting. Altaïr just jumped up and sat in Desmond's hood. Altaïr was still angry when they left the room. Sean had come up from behind Desmond, but hadn't come too close because Altaïr had his mini-sword pointed right at his nose. The rest of the day went with Ezio and Altaïr learning more English. Sean and Rebecca barely understood what they were all saying, as Desmond too had taken to talking in the same multi-language that Ezio and Altaïr had made up during the night. Another woman had joined them, Lucy, her name was, and Desmond had gone to talk with her for a while. She had, as far as Ezio could guess, insisted that Desmond sat in the red chair and do something that had to do with Ezio himself. Guess he'd find out eventually.